Today we are learning basketball with Logan Eby at Logan ROA_ on Twitter, contributor at Babcock Hoops, formerly Pro 16 League. Here to talk a little bit about NBA scouting, NBA draft scouting, and the guards, and just 2026 NBA draft as a whole. A little bit more theory and scouting theory. What goes into projecting guards at the next level? But first things first, how you doing today, Logan?
I'm good. I appreciate you having me on. This show has been in my rotation for a minute. I think generally what you guys just do at Swish is some of the best work out there. Obviously, what we do at Babcock is also great as well. So make us the first look, make you guys the second look. I think I have to say that in my contract, but there's not a whole lot of places with a smarter collection of mine, so I'm very excited to be on your show.
Hey man, high praise, appreciate it. Shout out to Babcock Hoops and Matt and Spencer Davies over there, the whole squad from friends of the show. Happy to have you on. And speaking of Babcock Hoops, we could start with your recent piece for the website, a little bit on Kingston Flemings. And, slightly before I pull that up, though, I want to hear a little bit more of your theory going into your scouting process. And, when it comes to guards, zooming out before we get into Kingston specifically, what are the sort of things that you're looking for to project NBA guards or potential stars at the next level? Is it specific stats? Is it specific traits on the film? Or, is it a mix of both that you're looking to see?
So for one thing, for me, when I just do my board, I'm only really thinking about championship level impact, right? There's a lot of players in the NBA. I was actually talking with someone the other day who's at an agency about Darius Garland and this phenomenon. Darius Garland's probably a really good regular season floor raiser. Darius Garland can pull you from the 12 seed to the 8 seed to the 4 seed, etc. But Darius Garland tends to have some limitations in terms of playoff basketball and in terms of fit with other ball handlers and things of that ilk, that I think Darius Garland probably isn't ever going to be a super serious player, at least on a max contract on a championship team. And my board personally is kind of built around that criteria because, one, I'm not with a team, right? I have no tickets to sell. I'm not worried about ownership wants to make the playoffs this year. We have to draft someone who can fit that. I can kind of build my fake basketball team and board around the idea of what I think championship impact is. So that's one thing that I look at. But with guards particularly, it is very much about two-way impact, right? If you look at pretty much every team to make the finals over these past 2, 3, 4 years, almost every single one of them have a guard who is some level of a two-way player, whether that be Derek White or Shea is a great turnover generator on defense. Shea is the best turnover possession guard, maybe since John Stockton, right? I said Derek White, or who was it on the Nuggets?
Caruso and Josh Hart this year.
Jamal Murray is by no means a cone at all, right? He's stocky, he can hold his own. These guys who are really, really poor defenders don't make it out of these championship teams regularly, right? You just saw Trae Young get dealt for a bag of chips to the Washington Wizards. So that's one thing that I kind of prioritize as well. And it's just what can you impact on the game, right? If you're gonna, I'm very much six factor oriented in terms of how I speak about the game as well. So if you're insane true shooting influence just through getting out of the mud on your own, that's cool. We can work with that. We can work with the team contract around that. But if you're more of a turnover suppressor, and you're doing it that way, I think that can work as well. So there's not really one mold. I think it's just a clear impact to winning on a title team is more of what I'm looking for.
Yeah, and I'm totally there with you in terms of valuing two-way impact, especially when it comes to playoff basketball. That's always been kind of my default team building. And maybe there's missing out on some regular season type stuff in that mindset, I guess. I can admit that going in, I'm not necessarily drafting a guy to drag me through 82 to make the 8 seed. I want a guy that can hold his own in a playoff series. It has few holes to be picked on either side of the floor. And to your point about the guards, shout out Becky Hammond. Other than Steph Curry, I don't know how many small guards really do this. You really have to be special, and Isaiah Thomas and all that. And a lot of them, like you said, do have two-way impact. And I think it's a lot harder to have two-way impact as a guard. So when you actually see the tools for a guy to be a plus defender and have developable ball skills to have a role on both ends, that's where the value is, it seems like. And how do you kind of apply that to this class? Is there any certain prospects that stand out above the others through this processing?
We can start with Kingston, since I had the article that came out on him today at the time of recording. Kingston to me is like easily the best bet in terms of two-way player. And I think it's not ridiculous to say that Kingston might actually be the best offensive guard in this class, just strictly due to his like overall offensive impact pile or profile being so rare, especially in that Houston context. Again, like I go a lot more in depth in the article that people can now see on the screen if they're watching on video. And it's just like Kingston has such a safe floor to me, right? And it's because Kingston is one of the best turnover suppressors we've ever seen. Like even going back to like his AAU and high school days, like I know high school data and AAU data is not necessarily out there to the maximum extent, but like in Kingston's 7 games we have on DX Gold, his Pro 16 offense was the best like offensive turnover offense in the Pro 16 league, right? And that was in their like championship bracket or something like that. I will say like being around the Pro 16 league, I wasn't there the year Kingston was there. People talk about Kingston like he walked on water. And I was a little bit early in the Kingston train, and that's one thing. They're like, yeah, he split the Red Sea, he walked on water, whatever. Like he was a Messiah-like figure to them. So I got the Kingston treatment a little bit early. And I think just the defensive end for guards, if you look at a lot of the really successful defensive guards in the league by whether that's EPM, RAPM, even just like the film, a lot of them are just high field. Like people kind of freaked out about like Kingston's measurements on like Combine Day and, you know, the 6'4.5" wingspan and 6'2 3/4" or whatever it was in socks. The best defensive guards aren't these like Anthromax guys. And if they are, they also are incredibly high field. They have great hand-eye coordination. They have anticipatory skills, all of these things, like the rotational ability, etc. And I think that's what separates Kingston. And we can get more in depth into the offense as well. But I think Kingston is kind of the epitome of what a modern point guard should bring, while having like the old school flair to his game that I think Houston kind of forced out of him a lot more than he necessarily wanted to bring.
Hey, the point guard of the Pro 16 league, it sounds like, you know, making a name for himself, building the legend early on.
Lie. He might have just been like the god of the Pro 16 league, to be honest. That's the way to talk about him. It's not even limited to the position.
Yeah. I mean, there it is. I mean, to be fair, like, you know, he stood out at top 100 camp as well. This was a little while back, but in 24. But, you know, he was one of the best kind of creators back then as well. And just one of he's a legend in Texas and just from the grassroots up. And in terms of high school hoops, and, you know, here he is. And he's kind of blazed that trail for himself and really does have incredible two-way upside, I think, for those reasons. And to me, I agree that that's kind of one of the things that makes him stand out among these many talented guards, is that he has the defensive feel as you get at to have upside as a defender while also arguably being the best passer, playmaker, and decision maker as a drive and kick, start, stop, burst threat in the class. Like the pull-up three is like interesting. I think that's something of an X factor for his development, but he clearly like is confident in it. So if he can get the numbers to kind of back it up, force defenders to not go under screens, then you're looking at like a guy that can get to the rim at will and decel and great playmaking and be a plus defender and be a pull-up shooter, like, you know, a modern point guard that can run a lot of things. And that defense and that playmaking, the ability to score, I think that kind of like you said as well, allows him to maybe play a few different roles depending on his context, where he's not too ball demanding, where he only gives impact with the ball in his hands, even though he is that kind of, you know, point guard creator. Like he seems like he can adjust his game to play for what what his team needs. So, you know, what led you to, you know, maybe not compare to Curry, Halliburton, and Paul here, but at least, you know, what makes you kind of see the feel on both ends of the floor like that?
It's really just that this is the best like feel and touch profile to come along since those three. And Matt made me like strip down the work a little bit because I don't think he wanted to scare GMs by calling Kingston generation or anything, which I wouldn't do. Like this is by no means a perfect guard prospect in any sense, but in terms of just the feel and touch intersection, this is the best guard to come along since Halliburton, like just objectively in terms of Kingston's feel, right? Like in terms of the turnover suppression and the defensive feel, the defensive rebounding for a guard is like unbelievably good, especially when you then consider like his anthros. And then the touch profile being like an 84% free throw shooter, who over his last like 1,000 free throws that we have is like 81% or something like that. Like he just clearly has the touch to, you know, develop that level of 3-point shooting to me. Like I know his agency is very much aware of this like pull up 3-point issue that they need to address, and they're getting him to work on it. Like that's another reason, like there's a little bit of intel there where I'm like, yeah, like this stuff might just work itself out because they know what he needs to get better at. And then while being that good of a 2-point scorer is kind of the comparison. And then like before Halliburton, the best guard with that intersection was Curry, and then the best guard with that intersection before them was probably CP3, and like before that was it arguably John Stockton. That's not to say that like I think Kingston is a worse prospect than pretty much all of those players. Like maybe a little bit comparable to Halliburton, but like Chris Paul is an unbelievable prospect for so many reasons. Like Curry is just, you know, the difference between like Kingston as a shooter and the greatest shooter ever is a very big gap in terms of your impact. But like I would argue that Curry's probably a worse passer than Kingston Flemings was as a prospect. Like I actually would very much argue that. I would very much stand on that. And I think that's kind of what the comparison is. It's he might not be like as functionally good as this player, but like 90% of Tyrese Halliburton is probably a top 3 player in this class, right?
Right. I mean, that's a really impressive star if that's the turnout, and you have one, if you have one of the best mixes of touch and feel, which can be hard to guard. I mean, hard to measure as well. That, but I think, you know, highlighting some of those stats from whether it's assist to turnover or assist percentage to turnover percentage, and you know, the offensive rebounding percentage, that highlights some decision making, the steals versus the fouls, or just the steal percentage. Like and on top of that, your offensive PPP, like either in individual scoring play types or maybe including passes. Like I think that's reflective of feel as well. But there's a lot of different ways. You know, it in many ways it's decision making, and there isn't a clear stat for it, but it's more of like, well, we can't measure the decision itself. We can kind of measure the results, and these are the good decisions that worked out. So kind of working backwards, we have a good decision maker. And, you know, I'm with you. I think he's one of the highest two-way feel guards in a while. You know, I'm probably a little higher on Dylan Harper, but I think like that's a comparable type of two-way guard, even though Dylan's a lot kind of bulkier, I would imagine at this point, and bigger just overall. But, you know, just some of their play style and where the two-way impact could come, and decision-making and playmaking. But just one of the most impressive guards of the class. Let me ask you this. How do you evaluate, when it comes to big boards, how do you evaluate someone with this incredible mix of touch and feel? Let's say you think he's the best processor in the class and has as high of indicators for everything, impact, whatever you're really high on. How high is that worth betting on over, let's say, like one of even the top 4 guys in the class, who maybe you're individually, or any scout is individually lower on one of the 4 guys, and they're at 4th, and they're like, you know, I kind of like this guy better. Maybe I'll just trade back for a pick and get Kingston at 5 or 6. Maybe I'll, whatever it may be. Is there a case to bet on the feel and touch based on what you see over, like, if you're going to value processing over everything, isn't this one of the, you know, like you're saying, shouldn't he be a top pick? So where do you value the weight of, let's say, like, you know, the safety of taking the exciting prospect who everyone wants number 1? There's no real risk involved. You're not going to get fired for taking AJ Dybantsa anywhere in the top 4, and you might get fired for taking a guard over him. But if you think the guard is just a better bet to be a pro for one reason or another, like, how do you weigh all that in, I guess, in your big board processing?
Honestly, at the time of recording, like I have Kingston in his tier with the 2 through 5 guys, I guess. Then I have Booz in like a slight tier by himself, and even then I've considered dropping him down. I've flirted with Kingston at 2, and I will say, like, at the time of recording, like the final grade of the board is not due, but just this idea that this is basically just the perfect guard in terms of a processing and feel perspective. And then from like the scoring perspective, like the ceiling legitimately might be limitless because of what Houston is restricting him to. Why is this not just one of the 2 to 3 best players in the class? Especially even, I don't think the rest of this class is as Teflon as like the mainstream media makes it out. Like Darren to me is just not like a ball handler, right? Like Darren is very much like a Danny Green type of player. And like Danny Green's really good. Like Danny Green's impact metrics are like absurd, like multiple, I think like top 40 RAPM peaks, EPM loved him as well, but like Danny Green's not a creator, right? Like Danny Green uses off-ball gravity and what's a turnover generator on defense, one of the better shooters that we've seen. Like I will say, like Danny Green is very fundamental to my understanding of basketball. Like one of the first finals I remember watching is the 2013 finals, because I was 10 years old or 9 years old, whatever, which is probably terrifying to older people listening to the show. But and then like I think AJ, like as a defender, is like incredibly lackluster. And if we're chasing this kind of like 2-way impact, then well, what does being like 25th percentile on one end of the floor really mean, even if you're going to hit like this 95th plus percentile outcome on offense, right? Like how much are we potentially giving back? And then like Caleb, I just worry about like, what is the role, you know, as like a dunks and assists and defense guy. well, we're dunking without incredible anthros. His wingspan measurement was very mediocre for someone who projects out as a 4, who's primarily going to be like a hybrid finisher, is I guess what I would call him. And then with the passing, like on film, like the numbers are very impressive, but so many of his passes are just like high-low actions. Like those aren't really like functional translatable passes, and I don't really know what to make of that. So yeah, like for me, like my confidence interval on Kingston is a lot higher than some of these guys, even if I think like the quick like view ceiling, if that makes sense, is lower than what you like. You can watch Caleb Wilson once and be like, oh yeah, I can see this guy winning a deep way. Whereas I think you have to watch Kingston Flemings like whatever it is, all 37 games he plays to be like, could this be one of the best guards in the NBA?
Kingston is, just a joy to watch. And like you said, like the more you watch him, the more you see those decisions come out. Just clearly a team first type of guy that cares about winning, cares about his team. A perfect fit with Kelvin Sampson's Houston program and that culture that they built. And, he even got, if I remember right, he got called out for his defense early on in the season and developed a little bit there. And there is a difference between like being a great defender already and having the tools to do it. And, I can't say why exactly it takes guys different time to do it, but some guys take a little longer to find their NBA form, whether it's adding strength or developing certain aspects of the game, maybe the game just slowing down for them. But the feel is a big one. I forget. I want to say it was Avi that tweeted this, that he really likes to look at guards with when measuring the NBA combine. That like speed. Now I forget, but it was like speed, size, and processing, or something. Where like his big 3 attributes, I believe. So I tend to agree with that. Are there certain skills like that you think like how do you project defense that way, I guess? Or let me rephrase. Are there certain skills you think like that are the best traits to kind of bet on for future NBA development and impact? Like, is it a guy's, I think quick first step burst is one of the most bankable traits in a guard, especially when it's not just that start stop explosion where they can't slow down, but they can get past their first defender and they have the body control to decelerate on a dime or change direction and score or draw foul, kick out. Like that's what I want to see in pretty much every guard that is trying to create. But that's definitely a standout thing that Abuka Okorie stands out for that. Kingston Fleming stands out for that. It is that's one example. Are there other traits like that kind of you look for in guards?
I think feel is really just the main one. And it's because the floor it takes to be a primary ball handler in the NBA with the amount of actions that you see on defense, or like the coverages, on defense, and kind of the decision making tree you have to follow is so large. And I think that's kind of what, for me, like separates Kingston, because if you look at someone like Braden Smith, actually, who I have like probably way higher than the consensus is going to end up on Braden Smith, which we can talk about that later if you'd like.
Hey, point guard right there.
Yeah.
I mean, you're getting Smith, a point guard.
Right. Yeah. Braden Smith doesn't have the Kingston anthros and the Kingston burst and the Kingston size. Like, I would even argue, like, to some extent, Kingston's touch, like, relative to age, is probably better than Braden Smith's is currently. Like, there's some things with that we can get into. And I think that's where, like, Kingston being this, like, maxed out feel, not like maxed out touch, but like relatively high touch guard, it is what like I'm chasing compared to a lot of other guards.
I'll bring up did that not work? I'll bring up a data viz here of some Cerebo sports data that I've shared on the pod a few times, just to kind of visualize some of the guards we're talking about. I have 3, one that was Okorie centric, one at the bottom here that I'll pull up in a second, one that was more two-way impact idea, but starting here with the scoring creation one, where it's kind of a mix of like, here are the best Cerebro offensive players at scoring, going vertical, passing, going horizontal, and 3-point shooting. Is the darker the color of the circle, the better 3-point efficiency they have. So guys like Boozer, Dybantsa, Philon, Acuff, Abuka Okorie, Bennett Sturts, Christian Anderson, Tyler Tanner, Wagler, Mikael Brown, Swain, are all kind of up here for, and Flemings is right here as well. Flemings would rank, top 5 or 6 in the passing element. And I'm glad you mentioned Braden Smith, because he's far and away number 1 in their passing metric, as you can see. And, fun facts, like I know he's now the all-time career leader in assists in the Big Ten, I guess, for Purdue.
All of NCAA.
All of NCAA. Yeah. So, Pistol Pete probably had that one.
I would imagine. Bobby Hurley, actually.
Oh, okay. Never mind. Oh, breaking my bookshelf over here. Not the Dr. J book. Man, I'll have to fix that in a minute. But yeah, Braden Smith, like, as you were saying, like really another guy that definitely jumps out for his feel. Like he's clearly just a point guard. He's really high in steals, really high in assists, a walking decision maker, like a walking good decision kind of like incredible speed and burst off turnovers, pushes the pace, runs pick and roll, gets to his spots. Like, so you're betting on the field. Now, when it comes to, betting on processing and all that, is there a certain, where is the kind of line, I guess, between upside or win now basketball player? Like, do you think he has higher potential to be a starter because of the processing, or it's just maybe a safer bet to be a six man for a long time because of that decision making, but could be on a winning team while doing it? And, there's different factors there.
I think what I like so much about Smith is as long as he hits the anthro barrier, it's pretty hard to picture him losing. And it's because if you think about like guards who are this good of passers and decision makers, well, also like he'll probably be an isolation target on defense. Like he gets clipped on ball screens a little too often. Like he's 5'10" or whatever. Like he at least has the positive wingspan or whatever, which I wrote about that in I did an article on Braden Smith as well. So this is very much my thing this cycle is these kind of feel guards. But like off the ball, like he's going to give you enough, and that you can see that in the steal rate. He's a really great defensive rebounder again, just like Kingston was especially relative to his size, right? Like if you consider the fact that Braden Smith is like Chris Paul sized and is actually as good of a rebounder as Chris Paul was in the NBA. You can actually see that in his profile as well. What's interesting about Smith is just why can't the upside be higher if the most important trait for guards is feel? And the fact that like, I'll just say, like, I've been doing this for 4 years now as a draft evaluator. This is easily the best passer I've ever seen. And like having seen him in person now, yeah, like
well, there
I've seen him in person now like three times, yeah. Just like the angle manipulation and risk reward understanding, like in person and like the timing and everything, like out of this world. Like if Braden Smith ends up flaming out, like please just go to a G League game to watch Braden Smith pass because it's an enjoyable experience. And I think that's kind of what's interesting is like, okay, well, he has touch. This is another guy like 85+% free throw shooter, sniper in the mid range, sniper off the catch from three. He just struggles to get pull up threes up over drop coverage because he's tiny. And I'd imagine like the contest is affecting him a little bit more. And you can see that on film. Like, doesn't always square his hips too. Like sometimes he just like lets it fly crazily. And I'm like, it's fine. You're Braden Smith. You can try that in college. Why can't he hit like the comp I give is like baby Steve Nash outcome, where like he has all of the Steve Nash traits as like one of the best passers ever who never turns it over and is always going to like extend the advantage in the paint. That was one thing, like doing film study on him for my article. I'm like, just the way he draws out an advantage to the absolute maximum is one of the best traits I've ever seen for a guard. And I think Kingston would probably be my second best player in the class for that as well. Why can't he just be like a star level impact player? And like, I think with Smith, you get into the argument, like, can it work in the playoffs, right? Like maybe then is he Darius Garland rather than Steve Nash in the playoff sense because of the anthros and the defensive end in isolation and stuff like that. And like, I'm very pro BMI, like his BMI is not ideal or whatever. Like he's a skinny white guy from Indiana. But Braden Smith to me, like very much a 6-man level player with like a safe floor. And then, yeah, like could we get into really like absurd star level outcomes if he just makes pull up threes?
I mean, hey, that's a big difference. I guess that is the concern, right? The defense, I think, is just like, will it hold up in a playoff series? And you think between the steal percentage indicator and as feel is kind of the biggest sign that it will?
Generally, yeah. Like even just on film, you can see that Braden Smith like really gives a shit on defense. Like he had one play in the Big Ten tournament that I recall, I think it was against Northwestern. He like dives out of bounds for a loose ball that like he was the one who tipped it away, I want to say. And he's diving towards like the media bench. So like he's going to hit a wall and he's like, I'm going to do it anyway. I'm Braden Smith. I don't care. And he then like throws it like inbounds with English to like skip pass it back to, I think it was like Omar Meyer flying down in transition. So like he throws it ahead of the two defenders or the defender and Omar Meyer. Like Omar Meyer has a step on him. I'm doing a very poor job at explaining this. And then he spins the ball backwards. Pass. Yeah. To like bounce it back to Omar Meyer so the defender can't get to it. And I'm just like, well, there's only one guy on the planet who could do that. Because like other guys who could pass like that, actually like Luka or whatever, like or Jokic, like they aren't giving that level of effort, if we're being entirely honest. So it's like maybe there really is only one Braden Smith, and like this idea of like the white Midwestern college point guard who's like feel and effort maxed. I feel like this guy might actually just be good enough for the NBA compared to a lot of the other guys because the feel and effort is actually max. It's not max for college, it's max for like every single level. And I think that's where like I get a little bit higher on Smith than some other people.
Man, you know, that play you described sounded a lot like a Concanipple type pass or play as well from the year before that I might have seen. And the way you described him a little bit is not as like, you know, the shooter, but just the toughness and the feel of just being able to actually dive for a loose ball and save the ball, make the hustle play, and also throw a dime while doing it, like behind the back or to lead your passer or receiver to the rim. Totally agree. One of the most incredible passers. And just, you know, for anyone looking at the data viz, this is more of these are stats based on their college season. So this is kind of an all-in-one metric that just kind of puts all normal box score stats onto comparable metrics on one scale. And, you know, you mentioned some of the AAU data. That has been nice on Cerebro, being able to go through some of kind of big games for guys early on, see their best case, see their worst case kind of early on, and see how they developed to this point in the college season. While we're here, I might as well ask you about Okorie, one of my favorite prospects in the draft. What are your thoughts on him? And just I'll bring up this chart. This chart is very much meant to highlight Okorie's strengths. So it's not your average, you know, here's a random Bartorvik query. No, this is basically, here are the players that matched Okorie, freshman since 2010, in scoring efficiency via true shooting, assist percentage passing, steal percentage stealing, and BPM total impact. And then I kind of visualized it by their rim field goal attempts. So how often they got to the rim to shoot, and turnover percentage. So how low their turnovers were, suppressing turnovers. You can see Flemings is fourth on this chart here in turnover suppression, let's say, among NCAA freshmen since 2010. And to me, this highlights kind of what could be really great about Abuka, and Flemings too, but what could be kind of a difference maker for Okorie is that he gets to the rim as much as any star creator that has existed since 2010 with the ball, as much as anybody, more than anybody, and turns it over less than anybody, on top of being a walking bucket who's mastered ball handling and, to me, really stood out in person for his decision-making as well. Like, he's one of these guys that, on top of the wingspan being +6, the age-related BPM being really high, actually higher than Dybantsa, he's another guy that I kind of view right in this group with Flemings in the two-way guards. And, you know, it doesn't... You want to get the big board right. I think it depends on the team for most cases when it comes to, like, when you're, like you said, with Boozer being in a tier of himself, but maybe the next 5 or 6 being within a tier. Like, it depends on the team, but relatively similar, you know, I guess potential versus floors is what you're weighing in that tier. But all that is to say, you know, do you like Abuka for similar reasons here? Are you high on Abuka? And you know, on the other flip side, you know, is there, you know, anything I'm missing there in that scouting analysis?
I think like my biggest concern with Abuka is just the fact that I think he's a 1.5 guard. And 1.5 guards really just like aren't really my thing team building wise. Like that's one thing. Like I think the only really 1.5 guard I can think of to be like super successful is Jamal Murray. And that's because like Jamal Murray is playing with the 5-1, whatever you want to call Jokic, right? Like he's playing with the potentially best passer of all time. And like you gonna get the play off of that weakness as like a 1.5 who's more scoring oriented.
Yeah, kind of like Kyrie next to LeBron in theory.
Like, I guess Kyrie is the other great example of a 1.5 who got to do that. And like you see these guys kind of falter when they're asked to be primary ball handlers on their own over like a longer sample, and it's because they just don't have the passing repertoire. Now, the problem with Okorie, like if you just watch the film, it's clear like there were never passing opportunities to big men because his big men were not very good, like just point blank, right? Like they didn't
playing
have
at Stanford.
gravity. Yeah.
Big difference talent-wise than playing at Alabama or Arkansas.
Exactly, right? Like there wasn't a ton of opportunities for him to get like dump-off passes, and in the pick and roll, like it kind of was just like, yeah, I'm going to go get my own, and that's fine. The issue is then like if you go look at the priors, this is kind of who he's always been. Like let me pull up his assist percentage in AAU and at, was it Brewster, right? Is where he went. Yeah. They're like pretty mediocre, and I think this is kind of just who Abuka Okorie is, and I like him. Like he's inside my lottery, just because like the scoring is that good. But I think he's a lot more like one thing with Kingston is he's kind of just like fit agnostic to me. Okorie kind of needs like to play with either like a bigger one or like one of these wing handler types who's a primary passer. Yeah, like his final 3 SSB season, he's 20% assist rate, on, what is this, 17 usage. So like the assist usage there actually isn't terrible. Then with Brewster, he's on 18 usage, 17 assist rate. Like the assist to usage is always kind of sat around this 1-to-1 marker. And I think this year it's below 1-to-1 just because like he has to take on this level of usage that is higher for him. And the big men don't create as many passing opportunities, but 1-to-1 assist usage is still kind of one of these 1.5 guards. And then on defense, I just have a lower confidence interval with Okorie than I do, like, say, Kingston, just because of like the fact that I think he's slightly smaller, right? Like the wingspan's bigger, but and to me, he's just like less physical on the film as well. Like Kingston is very much willing to just like hit a guy and put up on him.
Sure.
I think you see that with like the box outs in particular, and that's why he's such a good defensive rebounder by just like his defensive rebounding percentage. And like maybe this is just a Houston coaching thing, but like Kingston has been taught this earlier in his life. He's like been taught to hit a guy. I think one thing doing AAU these past couple of years, you see like Texas teams just hit people, like all these Texas programs, right? Like I know the guys at Houston hoops really well, and I was talking with them.
I mean,
right. It's like
Desmond Bain talks about it.
Like it's a football state.
He's a TCU guy.
Yeah, I was joking with them. I'm like, dude, you guys, your Texas teams just always hit people. He goes, yeah, football state. He's like, all these kids grew up playing football. Like even the skinny ones, like they wanted to be, if they were tall and skinny, they wanted to be a tight end at first, and their coach was like, no, go play basketball. It's fine, buddy. We don't need you here. They all just like hitting people. And I think like maybe that's one thing with Kingston's like developmental path. That was just kind of what he came through, and maybe Ibuka can learn that and get a little bit better at that. But I think like again, this is just where we get like the confidence interval of what the draft is and what building a big board is. Is just the confidence interval is a little bit higher with Kingston. But for me right now among guards, like Ibuka would be like my 4th or 5th option in the draft, and like I have 5 guys inside my lottery, so that's actually a really good grade. It's just there's a lot of these guys in this class.
Yeah, we're gonna get to your big board ranking of the guards to finish out the pod here, but totally agree with the physicality aspect of Flemings. Like that is something that stands out just watching them. How tough he's willing to play. Like we said earlier, kind of taking that message to heart about the culture of Houston and wanting to be a strong defender, and he definitely did it. And yeah, I'm a little more higher, obviously, on kind of Okorie between the wingspan and the, just the general instincts. When I caught him in person, I loved his decision making, his feel. Like he was really putting the ball on his like a natural point guard type of instincts, and really blossomed, I think, as a scorer at Stanford as well. So there's some real development to me. Let me ask, do you see Dennis Schroeder as kind of a 1.5 example as well? That was another guard. When I saw him in high school, that was kind of one guy that popped into mind of just his general, maybe his, what's the word, not archetype necessarily, tendencies of just pick and roll, pull up threes, attacking the rim, and some natural point guard. That's one other guy, but he's kind of as long as like maybe not as long as Rondo, but that was another guy that came to mind too, was just the decision making and the length that he brings there.
I could definitely see the Shooter comp, and he's bigger than Shooter, so like that's probably a good thing for him that he's bigger than like someone with his stylistic tendencies.
To your point, maybe like 3 guard lineups are more his role to succeed at the next level, where there is kind of playmaking throughout the backcourt, where maybe you have Shea, Chris Paul, and Schroeder come to mind, where he's only the 3rd playmaker of the whole unit. Like that, you could see that if the defensive versatility can hang up and he can guard some 1s and 2s. That's really, I think, the flyer, because ultimately his ability, Ibuka's ability to just get to the rim at will without turning it over, to me, combined with his scoring and touch and handle and decision making, like I think there's room there where he could be a high impact kind of offensive engine by being the score first type of creator, where he is looking to score, but he can still read and react and make good decisions. But to your point, the 1.5 aspect of like not fully being either one, like it doesn't always translate to the best of both worlds. Sometimes you kind of only get half of one because of the way the roles are kind of built for guys to succeed. But on the other hand, I think the more playmakers and good decision makers, the better nowadays, if you can kind of keep them on the floor. So it's definitely interesting there. One last graph here was some two-way impact.
Before we get to that, I want to throw one last thing on Okorie that I really like.
Please.
And this is kind of going back to what you said earlier, where like, how do you quantify feel? Okorie's scoring feel is one of the highest that I've seen. Like if you compare like Okorie to Michael, who to me like very comparable in terms of who I would draft, it would probably be like very fit based. Michael probably has like a higher quote unquote like analytical ceiling as a scorer because he's just like Mr. Free throw rate, Mr. Pull up 3, and he can dunk, right? And if he just adds weight, like he's probably an absurd rim finisher instead of just being like a pretty good one. Michael's scoring feel to me on film is incredibly low. Like And that's why he's such a bad mid-range scorer across like every sample we have of him. And it's because just when people like stunt at him in the lane and when he gets bumped, like he doesn't really know what to do. And Okorie has all of these like traits where he's just is like, yeah, I know how to respond to this contact and I know what to do. It's just compared to someone like Kingston, for example, like his feel is more towards that rather than like this idea of passing and extending an advantage. And I think that's what's so fascinating with like guard eval and why so many guards are like fit based and really like the basis of building any team, even if you're superstar, it's like a wing or a big. All these guards have different levels of feel, and it's because like they've learned basketball in a random way. Like Ibuka Okorie might have been like a taller kid. I don't remember, like playing against his friends in the park, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go score on my friends every time because they're my friends, and I want to make them look stupid." Right? Like he wasn't out here trying to pass and develop those skills. But I think that's what's kind of interesting about like guard development, where you get in this like what is quantifying feel, because yeah, like you said, Okorie's feel on the film for what he needs to do inside the lane probably one of the highest in this entire class.
Yeah, and on top of that, just the self creator of it all, and being a different self creator, I think stands out because defenses are taught to handle certain things. It's why I think I'm a little higher on Philon as well. Just the ability to create, not only create on your own, but create good looks for you that are bad looks for the team normally, that defenses are trained to like want you to take. You know, Jalen Brunson is doing it right now for the Knicks. Guys that can get their own shot and make it anywhere on the floor. Like if we're talking about the star primary creator of the whole team, like I don't care where you're taking shots if you're making them. Like that's the big difference, right? Like the efficiency aspect obviously comes into decision making, and like they don't all have to technically be Morey ball shots. Like I think on the aggregate for your team, your role players should generally be taking those best shots. But specialists and stars, the ones that make these things consistently, like that's where you build a dynamic offense to me. And what makes
that's who Shea is. Yeah.
Right. That's what makes Shea so great is like, yeah, he checks all the boxes of defensive feel and playmaking and scoring efficiency, but he also does it in a weird way that is really hard to defend. And to your point about the Texas stuff, I do think that basketball, like, it's not a contact sport, but the guy that hits first is generally going to get the call or going to get the defender to be thrown off balance so they can get a better shot. Like at this point, like bump and finish is a huge part of the game, whether it's trying to get calls, whether it's trying to force contact and finish through it. And, like being able not just like to take it, but to being willing to dish it out can be the difference for a lot of these guys. And that's a huge part of the game for physicality, and all these, Dylan Harper, big guards doing it right now. That is another example. So I put up the two-way impact just to round out this part of the pod here of those stats. And these are some defensive instincts, sorry, let me rephrase. This one shows overall impact of college 2026 season versus defense. And to be clear, defense is a part of the formula for overall impact. So the point, and so is around the rim, which is the color of the circle. So around the rim is more like blocks and rebounds and 2-point percentage. Defense, DSI, is more closely to steals and fouls. And CRAM accounts for both of those, but is all around impact. So this is meant to visualize, like, of the guys that are the highest impact of my top 50, here's how they lay out by their defensive stats and their hustle stats based on college hoops, just their 1 year of college hoops there, or the most recent college hoops. So, Boozer, Wilson really pop out for their two-way impact. That is why I'm a little higher on Wilson than Dybantsa as well, I think, at this point, is that, like, I actually, like, while they both might have similar measurables, I think Wilson projects to be potentially an elite all-defensive type player, and I think AJ projects to be a plus defender, and I'm a little lower in general on his processing, I think, is what it is, and the defense. But obviously, he's one of like the most electric like scorers and shooters, and at 6'8", being able to do all this, it makes it an interesting evaluation because he's one where I think like, the ceiling is there, could be there all along, very obvious in all of our faces. And that's why many people have him number one, because he's high flying, throw down dunks and hitting crazy Kobe fadeaways any angle. But I have watched a lot of him, and I would say that like he takes a lot of tough shots that he can make. But, I'm just a little higher on the processing and potential overall impact of some of these other guys, and it's a loaded class. So if he's like, what do you make of the AJ Dybantsa versus like Andrew Wiggins type of a comp? Because I think that's like the shot profile of like RJ Barrett and Wiggins, and maybe being like a plus defender like that. Like Wiggins did not live up to the hype, but he was also an all-star and an elite defender in a playoff run and in a championship run, locking down Luka, 20 points a game. Like, I think Dybantsa can be a walking bucket, 20 points a game as soon as he gets in the league, and a better shooter than Wiggins, and, could still be kind of a iffy defender. And that iffy defense and iffy decision making makes the winning impact, especially when we're talking like winning in the playoffs, and be on top of the idea of like, you're now betting on this guy to be your primary decision maker, your max salary player, your heliocentric creator potentially. Like you're relying on his decision making as much as anything. So I know I rambled a little bit there, but what are your thoughts on kind of Dybantsa? And we hit on it a little bit, but compared to, I guess, the Wiggins comp, and just, how do you account, at least on your board, for his upside versus maybe the feel and processing of these other guys that we talked about a little bit earlier, but to round it out?
The Wiggins one I've never been a huge fan of, and it's because I think Andrew Wiggins was always just miscast in who he was. And I think that's why like Andrew Wiggins at his best was on that Warriors team where he got to like offensive rebound and take assisted shots. Like, I don't think people realize how assisted Andrew Wiggins was at Kansas. Like at the rim, he's 47.5% assisted. That's like a Yaxel Lendenberg number. Right, like I think Andrew Wiggins was always kind of one of these players who was built to be like an off player. And the other thing with like the Wiggins comp is, even though like AJ's passing is right, like you're playing like AJ ball, like you're just doing whatever AJ wants essentially, and he's able to pass out of it. And whether or not AJ ball is effective, it's an entirely different discussion. He's at least very good at AJ ball. Wiggins was never this level of passer. Like I think what the Wiggins thing is, he kind of just got miscast as a creator because like his turnaround midi looked tough, and like there's a difference in a guy's turnaround midi looking tough and a guy's turnaround midi looking functional. And I think what the AJ thing is, AJ's turnaround midi is a little bit more functional to me than these guys like Wiggins. Like you saw Barrett actually struggle because he never had this level of in between game, and you see it in the NBA. Like when you bump RJ Barrett at like the 17-foot marker, like RJ Barrett has no idea what to do when he gets bumped at that barrier, and like he's just rimmer threes man, and he's not good enough at threes to like be a functional one of these guys. Like we talk about like championship teams, like I don't really think that RJ Barrett's one of those guys. But like, can RJ Barrett score 20 on a whatever the Raptors were this year, 7 seed, 6 seed, whatever, like
something
can
like
he
that?
do that? Probably. And I think AJ's ceiling is a lot higher, because even if AJ is deficient as a defender, even if AJ is deficient as a passer, he's probably going to be highly level turnover suppressant because he's just taking so many shots. And if he's just good enough at taking those shots, is he going to be one of these guys who's high level true shooting impact, especially with the free throws and the fact that like we have the biggest touch sample ever of any one and done on AJ Dybantsa. It is because he has the biggest EYBL free throw sample ever. We have all of his synergy games from EYBL and all of his mid-range jumpers ever. We have all of them in EYBL Scholastic ever. We have all of them in college, and he took a ton of them in college, right? Like we just have a sample of like AJ Dybantsa is going to make his middies against like pretty much anybody, and we know he can do it against pretty much anybody because he's 6'9" with a 7-foot wingspan. And how many guys are there in the league that can really affect that shot? So like, am I drafting AJ Dybantsa like worried about what Jaden McDaniels can do to his turnaround midi? Like maybe, but like not really. Like that doesn't really specifically factor in my evaluation, because like there's only one Jaden McDaniels who can guard him with that level of like length and fluidity and flexibility, like all the things that make Jaden McDaniels. So I think with AJ, like the ceiling is kind of like this. It is very much like glass. Like if AJ is just like, yeah, I'm gonna, instead of middies, we're gonna take pull-up threes, like it's probably just over for the league. And if AJ's just all of a sudden has like outlier field development on defense, like it is also probably over for the league. But how realistic are those things? Like he to me looks kind of uncomfortable getting to the kinds of pull-ups that you need to get to from three. He is very much one of these like drive and stop midi guys, or like the back down free throw line pull-up is his other go-to. Like the way that guys get to pull-ups is one of the more like interesting things among like scouting. And that's where like I talked about this in the Kingston article. The way Kingston gets to his pull-ups to me looks translatable to three. If you look at like Okorie is a guy great at getting to the 3-point pull-up. AJ to me has never looked that comfortable at the 3-point pull-up. Like I remember EYBL his junior year with Oakland Soldiers, like going into his junior year, he was like just spamming like the hardened step back. And I'm like, this isn't you. Like, please stop doing this. Like, you're not good at this. It's okay. Like, it's 16, you're 16 years old. You're allowed to experiment. Like, I think there's very much a thing as like developmental bad shots, developmental turnovers at that age. If we're just looking at like functional winning, like that's just not who AJ Dybantsa is to me. At that age, like AJ Dybantsa, not a losing player. Want to make that perfectly clear. But I think like those comps are hard, and I think AJ is kind of a one of one prospect, and I think that's what makes him difficult for people, and why like the range on AJ Dybantsa can be so wide, because GMs look at it and they're like, we've never seen this before. This could change my franchise. And then like the Twitter nerds are like, well, we've never seen this before, and I don't like that, and it scares me, and it's bad. And it's like, it's probably somewhere in the middle, but I think like the range that AJ Dybantsa could be is probably very, very wide.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I've definitely struggled a little bit for a lot of those reasons on the evaluation for him, because like, he just stands out as electric in some areas and kind of questionable in other areas. And, with how the league is going, like, totally agree. Like the scoring and the shooting is going to translate, but I think some of that like decision making is what I guess call it. But his develop, or the way that he pulls up for those shots and his kind of decision to do that is something I question a little bit. And it's, maybe I'm making a little too much of it. But I do think he kind of falls in love with that turnaround back shoulder fade a little too often, and it's what like the hardest shot you can imagine, and like he can make it, but like that should be the buzzer beater at the end of the shot clock, not like the first look. I guess.
Yeah, we should not be taking that with like 8 minutes in the first quarter.
Yeah, like he's just he's so talented and so gifted that he's comfortable taking it, and like I think there's a time and place, and that is where you get into, over a full 82 game season plus the playoffs as a lead decision maker. How often is that gonna like hurt your team if he's just kind of taking really tough shots? Now, to your point, he's gonna make a lot of them, so he is gonna be like that. That is kind of the give and take here. Is like he could be really electric, efficient, mid range scorer, tough shot maker, primary option level scorer. But how do you build the team offense around it, or fit him into it, while also building a team defense that kind of like he needs to be one of your weaker pieces defensively, I think, to build that lineup the right way. And like I said, like I agree that I don't know if you said that, but I kind of do think his best role would be, play finishing, scoring, shooting as a secondary connector, where he can tap into some of his playmaking, but he's not asked to run point for the whole offense every time down. Like, a lot of teams are doing nowadays, where they just put the ball in their best players' hands and say, go create the advantage and read and react and create the decision from there. We'll just lean on that. But I wouldn't want to be the team that bets on that with the number one pick, with the max salary, with the expectations that come with that. But there's definitely a clear talent there. That's what makes it so intriguing. Like there's nothing to take away. So I do, I have him in that second tier with a lot of these other guys that we've been talking about. Let's round out the pod with your rankings of the guards, or both of ours, I suppose. But let's go with generally speaking. Darius Acuff is considered one of the most talented, but also more polarizing guards in this class. Obviously, he's really interesting. There's Braden Burries, there's Mikal Brown, Cameron Carr, Bennett Sertz, Christian Anderson, just to name a few. We'll throw Dalen Swain and Keaton Wagler in these talks for the heck of it. Where do you rank your guards at the moment after everything we said, applying the feel and touch to your scouting process that, might make sense why I expect Flemings to maybe be higher than most of these guys?
Yeah. So I like on my overall board, my tiers are just based off of like, so the first one is like all NBA level impact. And like, I don't really care about NBA awards. Like to me, it's like, okay, EPM is like, okay, can we hit like 90th percentile would be like tier 1, right? Like I don't have a single guard in that tier. Then the second tier is like, can we hit like 85th percentile EPM, something like that? Okay, Kingston Flemings falls into that tier, right? And he's in that tier with, the guys that we mentioned, like Dybantsa, Caleb, flirted with Yaxel on that tier, but I don't think I'll get there by the time the cycle's over. Then I have a 2-tier dip, where I don't have a single guard. And then it's Bennett Sturts, Mikal Brown, Keaton Wagler, and Okorie in like a very quick run, where it's kind of just like dealer's choice of what I would want. I think like Sturts is the guy I'm most comfortable in being like a good NBA player, but like is the ceiling a little bit lower based off of the athleticism and the age? Like most likely, yeah. But is the ceiling also really high because he just can bomb pull up threes and is one of the better finishers we've ever seen at point guard? Like also probably true. So I think like Sturts is probably going a little bit under discussed this cycle as like a true star bet. Like could he be like budget Dame? Like maybe. And then the defensive side is interesting just because of like the offensive load and like we don't have on ball percent for college, but I'd imagine he would be like the class leader in on ball percent. Then I have like a little bit of a dip in my board. Then it's Philon, Braden Smith actually, and then Acuff. Philon for me, I just wish he actually played defense this year. The moment his usage touched 30, like he's been a defender his entire life, and then his usage touched 30, and he basically decided to stop passing like a point guard, and he decided to stop defending like a functional point guard. Like he went from me last cycle being like offensively skewed Chris Dunn. Like I actually had LeBaron like quite a bit higher than the consensus last year.
I love LeBaron's game for that same reason, man. I thought he was like potential, like Drew Holiday, not in just the defense, but like the play type too, like just a bulk, but a little shade to him too. Just a weird, different type of ISO driver that can score at his own rate, but also clearly was making hustle plays, winning plays like it was nothing, especially as a freshman. That's been a big thing where I've given him kind of credit for both, where it's like, I've seen you do both, so now I believe that you can maybe do both at the next level, depending on the role. If we maybe lower that usage, can we get more effort defensively kind of thing? But, you're worried that maybe he's just given up on that end and focused more on the bucket getting now.
Yeah, one thing you actually see with guards in particular is once you touch this like high usage threshold, and if you do just like lose the ancillaries or whatever you want to call them, a lot of times they don't actually come back for guys. And that's one thing with like LeBaron that I worry about. I also like he gained 1 pound from last year to this year. Like that was one thing I was concerned about last year. Like, is the weight? Why did we gain 1 pound at the combine? Like that probably needed to be a little bit better. But I love watching LeBaron Philon. Like I think among just pure watching enjoyment, outside of probably Braden Smith, I think LeBaron is probably my favorite watch of any of these point guards as college players. And then Acuff, it's just the fact that I think this is probably one of the worst defenders I've ever evaluated. And kind of we opened the pod with me talking about like you kind of have to give some two-way impact. Even if Acuff's offensive ceiling is pretty high, even then I think it's probably a little bit lower than like some of the mainstream consensus thinks. If he's going to be like the worst defender in the NBA, do I really even care? And I will say like I actually had Acuff lower until about a week ago. And then I really went through like his previous profiles, and it's like, oh, like his IMG team in high school was the best offense in all of UIBL Scholastic, and they led in turnover percentage. So like, I don't know if you're familiar with the idea. It's almost like a gimmick of the Acuff turnover suppression is due to the Cal pace concept.
Not familiar with the idea there.
So it's the idea that this is like one of the only Calipari teams that is like incredibly low turnover percentage. Therefore, like we must attribute this idea to Darius Acuff. If you actually look historically, the 3 Calipari teams that are all really high or really low turnover percentage, so like ranked highly in turnover percentage, like they're top 10 on BART or whatever, it's all his like 3 fastest teams ever who have transition as like their highest play type. And you can kind of be like, well, is that Acuff then, or is it Cal's history? And for a while, I was like, it's probably Cal's history. Then if you look at like Acuff's EYBL teams, his EYBL Scholastic teams, they were always very low turnover percentage. And it's like, okay, it's probably a push and pull dynamic of both of them. So like I kind of conceded a little bit of ground on the Acuff thing. The thing with Acuff I struggle with is just he's not a 44% 3-point shooter, and he probably never will be. And if Acuff proves me wrong on my board because he shoots 40% from 3 in his NBA career, like you got it. Like I'll take that. Like great, there's another awesome 3-point shooter in the NBA that I can watch and enjoy watching. But we have like a long sample of his free throw percentage being like good, not great for a guard. Didn't actually take a step up in his free throw percentage this year. We have a huge sample of his 3-point percentage being good, not great for a guard. And I do think like there are some like noticeable mechanical adjustments he made this year going to Arkansas. I really don't think those adjustments are noticeable to the point of being 44% from 3. And I think that's where it's just like what actually happens to him as a scorer when like he is one of the worst half-court 2-point scorers in the entire class, right? Like bad finisher in the half court. Mid-range shooting is like good, not great. Like he's not a Kingston level mid-range scorer where Kingston cannot just like get to it whenever he wants if the rim finishing is an issue in the NBA. So he's a bad 2-point scorer who needs to get it in transition. Like that's one thing, like his 2-point percentage overall is not too bad, but in the half court specifically, it's quite bad. And what if he's playing in a slower paced team? Like then does he just fall apart as a scorer? And then if the 3-point magnet goes away, it's like, okay, are we just like totally cooked as a scorer? And then if the turnover influence is actually the Calipari gimmick and rather than the Acuff influence, which I think is, again, probably a little bit of both, how functional is he really? Plus the defense. I'm kind of like fading Acuff a little bit to the consensus. And then I want to shout out one guy I have a second round grade on, but does crack my top 30. Actually, 2 of them. Christian Anderson is like my literal first guy after my first round grades. He's just tiny. Like it's really it. I think he, compared to a lot of the smaller guards, is probably the worst defensive isolation target, I guess, outside of Acuff. But the there are team fits where I would very much like take Christian Anderson top 20. Like if the Spurs had a top 20 pick, like I think his level of pull up 3-point creation and the fact that they can insulate him defensively is probably one of the best fits for Christian Anderson. And like if I was that team, I would have a first round grade on him. It's just like he is more fit dependent than me. And then I think Jacoby Gillespie is probably the best, like outside of Smith, I guess, the best senior point guard bet who is like a really good offensive like floor raiser, potentially even a ceiling raiser with like his level of pull-up 3-point creation, the fact that he's always kind of finished and no matter what context he's in, especially like this disgusting Tennessee offense he was in this last year. And another guy like again, similar to Brandon Smith, like is going to at least like give effort, get some steals on defense, another good defensive rebounder. He fits a lot of those same Brandon Smith traits to me. It's just he's more scoring influence rather than Brandon Smith being the best passer I've ever seen.
There it is. Yeah, good names for sure. To me and Leipzig, one more guard just to throw out there. Otego away as well, kind of in the second round area. But yeah, really agree a lot on Christian Anderson. I think, we're a little worried on the size, but like one of the best shooters in the draft, especially as a catch and shoot threat and just a clear connector. Seen him a little bit with like Germany with Franz, or, coming up through Team Germany, I should say. And, I definitely obviously took over for Toppin halfway through the year and just like can handle some playmaking. Like I have talked myself into him being like right in that conversation and kind of that, late lottery tier, I guess, of like 11 to 20 range of some of these other guards where, like you said, like the defense is concerning. And I think you have to be able to make up for it in the rest of the lineup somehow, some way. And, Acuff is really, really tough eval because I agree. I saw him at IMG a handful of times for Mount Verde tournament, and like he makes the game, he's a blur out there sometimes. Like he makes the game look easy. And like you would think, like, to that point, like transition and like I thought of him at least at that level as like without anything else, he's a transition killer who's hitting his threes at that level. And he just, he's clearly got something that really, gets the crowd going, that gets his teamates going, gets people believe in this guy. Like
he's tough.
Yeah,
he's gonna have a sick mixtape.
That's it right there. Like he's Iverson approves, of the card game. But I am with you that there's just something about the game that seems hard to project to be like a lead creator, like in the modern NBA game. Like he seems like he slows down the ball on the ball a little bit, slows down ball movement to get to his shots, and he can make them and tough shots, but it's not overly efficient. And the defense, like you said, is just so bad that you really have to be an all-star type of guard or better to make up for it. And there are guards that at least have made up for it in the regular season, like Trae Young and Bradley Beal come to mind, where they're just literally the worst defenders by every metric, but they're so good offensively that they still are top 30, top 50 in overall impact once you level it out. And I definitely believe that there are, gives and takes in lineups where, like, yeah, you're not going to have 5 perfect robot players. Like if you have a really talented offensive source that you believe will create good shots and good decisions for himself and your team consistently to build around, and you need some help defensively to make everything work, like that's where the lineup building comes in. And you can, flank Shea or Steph with 6'9" forwards in every direction, or flank Shea, already a plus or elite defender, with a whole team of elite defense, and just go all in that way. And there's different ways to build the team. But to your point, I think Acuff's game is maybe a little less malleable than some of the other guards. Like you really have to bet on him being a star guard with the ball in his hands as a scorer, doing it his way. And, he has done it to this point, but there's a chance, like, we saw with like Colin Sexton, he was an electric scorer, and shout Ben Pfeiffer for that comp of sorts, I guess. But I remember him as an electric athletic scorer, like in college at Alabama. He beat up Trae Young in the head-to-head matchup. Like you can clearly see had a big game. Clearly could see some, like, okay, he's gonna be an NBA athlete, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be a top 10 or top 15 star guard creator that you really need to hit on to be worth the money, to be worth the draft slot, to be worth the investment from the team. And, some of that comes into the value and of expectations of a slot. Like if you get him a lot later in the draft, then there's no expectations and he can just kind of be himself and you build a team. But if you're going to take him top 5 or top 7, everyone is expecting stardom. And that's not always how it goes. And you really have to trust your process. But, all it takes is one team to kind of, build around a guy or believe in a guy, and maybe could go a few different ways. But, in terms of winning playoff basketball, I would prioritize some other guys. So one last time here, let's go through, let's say your top 10 guards. I've got Darren Peterson, Abuka Okorie, Kingston Flemings, LeBaron Philon, and if we're counting Wagler and Swain right in kind of that top group, and Swain kind of knocking on the door, but Wagler a little higher in terms of a creator. And then in that next group, I've got Swain, Christian Anderson, and Darius Acuff, Braden Burries, Mikal Brown Jr., Bruce Thornton, and Bennett Sturts to kind of round out the top 20-ish or top 22. And I'm still playing around with the order. I really like, I'm stuck a little bit on, say, Anderson three-point connector. Like, there's a real value there, I think, compared to some of these other guards. But, as you said, there's just, interesting cases for so many guys. I'll probably end up with Braden Burries and Mikal Brown a little higher than where I have them now, probably higher than Anderson and Acuff if I had to guess of where I'll end up right before the draft. But where does your, let's say, top 10 guards shake out for the 2026 NBA draft?
If we're counting Darren, I would have Darren like currently narrowly above Kingston, then Sturts, Mikal, Wagler, Okorie. I wouldn't count Swain, but Swain would be like in that group of guys as well. Then LeBaron, Braden Smith, Acuff, Burries. I realized I missed Burries last time we were talking because I have like roll filters on my board and it's complicated. Don't worry about it. But I think that was 10, right?
So that sounds about right. There's a lot of guys.
So I guess I'll shout out Anderson and Jacoby as the next two guys. So
there it is. One last thing. You were talking Darren Peterson to Danny Green a little bit earlier. That was something of a comparison, right? That's very interesting. I mean, obviously, like elite. I haven't really thought about him as that type of off-ball play finisher type, but in a way, like his best skill are those things by scoring and shooting, and it's not necessarily his playmaking. But I also, he is just so electric as a downhill, threat, as getting to the rim, pulling up for these crazy shots, athleticism through the roof. That's where the fun Kobe comps come in, I guess, of like just an electric guard prospect. He's been called the best guard kind of since Kobe. Could you maybe dial in a little bit more of that comp? Because now that you mention it, elite defense, elite three-point shooter. If he could do the transition defense gimmick or whatever you want to call it, he's already got Danny Green covered. His role covered. But and to your point, Green, a vital two-way impact piece to a championship contender for basically a dynasty of sorts. So like, obviously winning impact value. And I think there's probably more like, off the dribble scoring maybe for Peterson here, as like, that's where the upside is to, that's ultimately where I have Peterson and Wilson above AJ, is because of that two-way upside, where I believe that not only is the tough shot making going to translate, but the defense will too. So, two-way impact and versatility is a big one. But, what is it about the Peterson's game that has you maybe thinking more of a Danny Green type or archetype than say some of the other comps?
It's kind of just the fact that he didn't functionally like handle the ball this year. And I will say like the priors, specifically like the prolific ones, are absurd. Like, that was an athletic guard who got downhill and took like 38 usage or whatever he took, something absurd like that. Like it might have touched 40, who knows? Those were incredibly exciting. But the fact that he then, granted the injuries are like a thing that I don't have the details of, other than what's public about like the creatine cramps, and just like body confidence is very much a thing. Like I actually tore and broke my fibula. So I tore the ankle ligament and broke my fibula in like November, right? Just got back playing basketball again for like the first time like last month. The confidence of and I'm nowhere near as good as Darren Peterson. They were doing it's difficult to think of Darren Peterson. Just the confidence in my own body is not there to do like
that's
this similar.
That's the old man back problems, that I already deal with. Even though I found a cheat code, I might be saved for all the old man back problems. People out there, hit me up. I might have found something. But no, I feel you. I mean, I'm totally with you. The confidence in your body, especially like if creatine made him like have all these like weird body attacks. Like he's in the hospital. His
Yeah.
muscles are overexploded. Like he had too much of something. Clearly, like that's a weird reaction story where it's like, yeah, maybe we should let him kind of recover a little bit. Kind of, I don't know why the way Bronny was covered a little bit comes to mind, but like, let's realize what these guys are going through a little bit health wise, and not just talk about them as basketball robots. Like they are people playing basketball.
Yeah. And that's the thing with Darren, is just like, I don't know how I can project out like point Darren, maybe like 1.5 Darren, like 2 Darren, if he just not only didn't pass this year, he didn't like touch paint ever. Like I saw him in person when they played Houston, and guaranteed like Houston is a very like anti 2-point scoring defensive scheme. Like that is the best defense in the country on a year-over-year basis. He could not like do anything when he broke the 3-point line against them, and you saw that very frequently in like Darren Peterson games. The best Darren Peterson games were the ones where he's taking like movement threes and he's doing these kind of like Danny Green things. And I think I have high levels of confidence that like he can do this Danny Green impression. The issue is just like, will he get drafted and be asked to do that? Maybe not. And like the priors at Prolific were so good that I would let him try like the point guard stuff for at least like a year, maybe. But then you kind of look back and you fall on the 3 SSB priors, and the 3 SSB priors, like he also wasn't a very functional scorer there either, in my opinion. Like it was a lot of these just like, I'm going to post up and just take a turnaround maybe, and I'm going to barrel my way to the rim, and I'm a better athlete than people, so I can do it that way. Darren Peterson is not like the most athletic guard to ever touch the NBA. Like he got a lot of like taller Donovan Mitchell comps when he was coming out of high school, is one that I remember. Donovan Mitchell is a more dynamic and more explosive athlete than Darren Peterson. And like, I feel very comfortable saying that, even going back to when he was healthy at Prolific. Like, Darren's best athletic trait was always just like the way he moved looked different. Like the way he changed directions and did all this stuff, it looked effortless, but it wasn't something that I would describe as like relentlessly explosive. And that's one thing you look at, like these 2 guards who can make it work in the NBA. Like Donovan Mitchell's really the only one that comes to mind off the top of my head. Donovan Mitchell is like ridiculously explosive and just carries so much power through like his lower half and his core. And I've never really seen that with Darren. And he kind of always relied on this like fluidity, like not like gimmick, but like trait to score. And if that just like doesn't translate to the NBA, I think his scoring outlook is pretty cooked. But then yeah, if he has this Danny Green idea to fall back on, he's probably still a really good player. And like I would take Danny Green top 5 in this draft. So I'm comfortable having Darren, at 2, at 3, at 4. Like, he probably won't ever get to 5 for me, just because like if Danny Green is like the quote unquote floor, I should probably have you higher than 5 if there's also some more ceiling to tap into.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting way to think about it. And as you described his movement, it's definitely like he definitely just looked different the way he moved. Like at first I thought maybe a running back, but it was almost more of like a free safety or a cornerback off of an interception. And he just like makes changing gaps look effortless as he's moving, and like in a freestyle of like mayhem. Like he just looks naturally like he's getting from point A to point B.
So the football comps are interesting, because one that I like noticed is he moves like Calvin Johnson, who is like similar size, similar build,
I like it. I almost
wingspan.
said AP or something like Adrian Peterson, but Calvin's a good one. Megatron.
I think like the receiver comp is more interesting, because like the running backs have that like Donovan Mitchell, like deep in the stance. Like I guess Edwards is another one of these guys, like deep in the stance, power, generating like tons of forward force, can then like go diagonal, like jumping. Like the way we test verticals is always so interesting to me, because you never jump just straight up. You're jumping like forward and up. Like the one time you're jumping straight up is for centers who are going to contest at the rim and getting a hand up and like pogo sticking and stuff like that. But for guards, like it's very much like a diagonal activity. It's like a plane taking off. And Darren, to me, never had that elite trait. And I think like, if you look, I don't know what Calvin Johnson's vertical is. That might be where like I'm losing this idea. But a lot of just like the fluidity and like the bend stuff was very Calvin Johnson-y to me when I watched him. I think that was one that, like, if I'm thinking about just like guys who move like this, he is one of them. And I don't, maybe this is where I'm misremembering, I don't remember Calvin Johnson being like this explosive receiver. I remember him being like this fluid just glider. Like he just glid across the field at like breakneck pace, which I think Darren has this like level of top speed when he just like runs in an empty gym, and he just like was bigger than everybody, and he caught everything. He could serve hands. Like Calvin Johnson is one of my favorite childhood athletes ever, and I think like Darren has that trait, and it's not this like explosiveness But there was more of it at Prolific. That's the one thing. Like at Prolific, some of it was there. It just then didn't exist in Kansas, and how much of that is medical, how much of it is not. But even with the Prolific explosiveness, I still would have some questions about him being like this true one creator. And it really just came down to the passing is what the biggest issue was, is not having this explosiveness or the passing. My confidence interval is quite low.
Yeah, that's definitely a good way to put it, especially like high floor of something of a Danny Green role is that's high impact on a playoff setting. Defense, scoring, shooting. I mean, the scoring would be even better than kind of Danny Green, I suppose. Yeah. But even just getting defense and shooting out of it.
The Danny Green thing, like he's probably like more offensively slanted. Like when Darren would get to the rim, I would probably, if he's doing the Danny Green role, I would have some more confidence that he'd make the outcome better as a 2-point scorer than Danny would.
Yeah, and he's overqualified for the Danny Green role, but very capable of it, and possibly a little upside for more between the tough shot making.
But like, I think these guys who are like quote unquote overqualified at roles are actually the most impactful, like 2 to 3 options in the NBA. Like that's who Aaron Gordon is. Aaron Gordon was out here like creating on the Orlando Magic. Like you're, I'd imagine, quite familiar with that. And
that's the name that popped in my mind too. Like if you're overqualified for a role, that's probably your best role.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's where like projecting out Darren as this guy is potentially really interesting because like again, I'm far too young to remember what Danny Green looked like in high school. I'd imagine Danny Green's high school mixtape is probably really tough, right?
Now we got to find it. I wish I had it ready. Just ready to drop the highlights here, but. Yeah, definitely an interesting way to look at it. And I agree that the playmaking is a concern. And, we'll see. I kind of write off this year kind of like Kyrie's Duke year. Like, I've seen enough on the tape at different points to know this guy is special at full force, like you said. But if something was zapped along the way through all of this, whether it's explosiveness or athleticism, that changes things and can kind of create or affect his self-creation abilities. And, it probably is aesthetics a little bit that makes, makes certain things maybe look better or look good or whatever it may be. I think that what I was saying is that's where some of the Kobe comps might come, like the turnaround over the fade shoulder, like elevating for like buzzer beater threes and stuff, like clearly a killer type mindset. I think his first matchup, it was against, or not his first, but one of his matchups at Prolific against, I want to say Dybantsa.
Oh, where he had like 55.
One. Yeah, that was his. That was my introduction to. Oh, this guy is right in this conversation for the #1 pick with all these other guys, and like that since then. So like you've seen it, like he's been head to head, he's done it. But to your point, like these other guys have probably done a little more, and like bigger scheme. I'm very much with you that Boozer to me is not head and shoulders. We don't have to use the word generational, but when it comes to offensive hub, I think he's very different than most players we've ever seen and combined skills that we haven't really seen. So I think there's something there with his two-way feel being a little bit above everyone else. And, I think ultimately that his processing is what separates him from all these talents that clearly have skills. But I think more and more that's just where I've changed my scouting process a little bit, is to value the feel and processing more and trying to find the balance there of how much do you weigh. Like for me, I am comparing Fleming's processing to Dybantsa's talent, and in the top 5 conversation, I think it's a real enough conversation, even if, you think one is a better bet to be, let's say, a star than the other, or one has a higher floor than the other. I think it's a conversation, a real conversation in draft talks for who will ultimately be the better playoff player to help your playoff team win 7 games is through their defense, their decision making, and their ability to adjust through their ball steals and decision making. And I think Flemings has a lot of that. I'm glad you were able to come on and share your breakdown with the touch, steal, feel combination. Any parting thoughts here on the guard class of what could be one of the best guard classes ever?
Yeah, I think you kind of said it. It can be one of the best guard classes ever, and it's because these guys are all so talented. And I actually don't think it's a coincidence that these last 2 draft classes have been like considered good. And these are the first 2 draft classes we've had since COVID where these high schoolers played their entire career without COVID. Or like their 8th grade year was their COVID summer. They got every season of EYBL or 3SSB, Pro 16, whatever they could have played. They got every single season of it. They got full high school seasons. And I don't think it's a coincidence that like compared to the previous 2 drafts that like 2023 got a lot of hype based off of Wemby and what people thought Scoot was and probably never was, for being fully transparent. That class, like in terms of depth, very weak historically. Like you have guys, so I don't want to shout anyone out, but like go through like pick 5 through whatever it is, 17. Not a whole lot of good players in that draft, right? Like if you go through 2024, obviously, like at the time was known as a very weak draft. I just think it's a
drop off after the Thompson twins. I remember was as a Magic fan with the 6th pick wanting to trade up for a Thompson twin. We ended up with Anthony Black.
And you guys ended up with like probably the 5th best player in that class.
Yeah. One of the only we lucked out kind of to get the defensive connector type that like you said did pop of the few options there. But yeah, just incredible depth of talent, right? Where like, they might not all 15 guards might not be stars because they can't all be stars, but like a lot of them are talented enough to do it one way or another, and that doesn't come around very often.
Yeah, and I think that's what's getting people so excited. It's just the collection of talent. Like even if some of these guys like don't hit and they end up, whether it's like whatever term you use, like not impactful, empty calories, or just like outright bad, like it's gonna happen. Like some of these guys we think are good are gonna end up bad. Like hand up, all just 2023. I thought Jordan Hawkins was really cool. Jordan Hawkins, unfortunately, is not very cool. I had to learn from that one. Like people are going to miss, like NBA teams are going to miss, Twitter people are going to miss. It's okay. The talent in this class does mean that, like, I think outlier development for some of these guys could happen at a higher rate than in previous classes. And I think that's why GMs are so excited about this class.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I mean, there's just so much talent. It's really deep with potential stars. Reminds me a little bit of 2014 with the way we talk about that's with the Embiid and Wiggins Jabari class. It kind of reminds me of that with how we talked about like the top 3 or 4 is really great, but so is the rest of the lottery, and you still get other guys to pop. 2018 comes to mind too. I was going through, that's one of the best guard classes ever, where you got Luka at 3, Trey at 5, Sexton at 8, Shea at 11, and I think there was some more later in the class, but just some like clear potential stars. That's one that comes to mind for this one, because there's just so much talent here where you could be looking at varying levels of star guards, and it's a great time for the league to have all this talent be coming in and just keep rolling out new hoopers that get better every day. So excited to see where these guys end up, because that's the next challenge, is like all this draft talk in a vacuum, and then all of them are officially at one city and one team for the next 5 years, and could totally change everything about their path because of factors out of their control, is what I always say too. Like obviously, like their commitment and their dedication to the grind and getting better matters, but as much as the team being willing to give them a chance and opportunity and investing in their success, putting them in the right situation, hopefully having an ideal role where they can do their best skills while working on their not so best skills and have the room to develop like a tons of different things, where it's like we have these guys ranked higher now based on these traits. And it actually takes both sides really being committed to getting better for it to happen. And I think there's just a lot more out of control than maybe some of us are willing to kind of throw out there, I guess, is where my thoughts lead me. Is that we can love a guy for one reason or another, and you might be right, you might be wrong, even if like when you get the math problem right for the wrong reason. Like sometimes you just like a guy for certain reasons, and those end up translating, and maybe it's something else that translates. And maybe Philon ends up being more of a defender or something, because we saw it back then, but he still has that scoring in his bag. So who knows where it goes? But really exciting class. Thanks a lot for taking the time, Logan, to talk some guards, talk about your theory, and anything you want to update or share here for the pod.
I don't think so. Just follow me at LoganROA_. I think by the time this comes out, there should be some exciting news on there. Just in case it's not, I won't say it, because I think the people will be mad at me if I dropped a little bit early. But I appreciate you having me on. This is a lot of fun for what is probably going to be one of my last podcast appearances. I guess I'll hint at it with that.
Oh man, what a tease! Well, I'm glad we could get you in before you're no longer available on the podcast market here, Logan. Congrats, and good luck with your future mystery tease there, whatever it could be. Good luck with all that. But thanks a lot for taking the time, man. It's been a lot of fun learning and sharing your perspective.